Good evening. Welcome to the QCIS channel. On this channel, you get a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math. My name is Leon Jones, and here we go once again, particularly here in the state of Indiana, and I'm sure it's going on in other states. It's construction season, and there are a number of consulting firms and even state DOTs. They're looking for construction inspectors. Why are they looking for construction inspectors? Because there's work going on and work has to be done according to project plans and specifications. Now, what is really the duties and jobs of the construction inspector? Some call them technicians, some call them observers, the same thing. Well, basically what the inspector does, he or she will go out there and just inspect the testing. They may be performing testing. They're going to document all the contractor's work. They're going to work with the contractor to make sure that problems are solved. And one of the most important items that the inspector is going to do is take measurements for quantities. Now, why is that important? Because the quantities are in the contract and they're basically cubic yards, linear feet, square yards. So you're basically dealing with a length, an area, and a volume. Of course, you're dealing with tonnage as well. That's some of the items. But what I'm going to teach you all as inspectors or want to be inspectors is how to document your work. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pull up what we use here in Indiana. It's a system, or it's a construction management document service known as SiteManager. Now, I like ECMS a lot better. I use that at PennDOT. Now, let me share my screen and tell you what I really mean here. Okay, now, what we use here in Indiana, if you work for NDOT, and there are other states who also use it. I know VDOT uses it, ODOT, Michigan uses it, Texas uses it. It's SiteManager. It's really sponsored by AASHTO. The American deals with the state highway transportation officials, AASHTO. Well, what you see here on my screen is SiteManager. It's a construction management system for field personnel. Now, why is that important? Well, when I first started inspecting in the late 90s and the early 2000s, we didn't have an electronic document system. We did it all by hand. Now, today we have computers, but what you enter into the computer is the same thing you would do when you are just writing it out. In fact, when I go out and inspect, and here's something important that you need to do as an inspector, get a field survey book and take notes as you go along, because suppose you have a big job. Well, one inspector cannot cover efficiently and proficiently multiple large operations going on. So if you're an inspector and you're covering an operation, there are certain items that you need. And when you're watching a contractor, you have to document what the contractor is doing daily. Now, we call them daily diaries, daily work reports, but they're reports that document what went on that day. And if you have a field survey book and you're out there with the contractor, you can get everything out in the field, and then you can go back into the office and put it in the computer. That way you don't forget anything. Now, I'm going to go through some of this information so you understand what I'm talking about. This is SiteManager. Of course, it's 10 years old, almost 10 years old. However, it still functions the same. And what I'm going to talk about are, we call them daily work reports. Now, the field personnel create daily work reports of construction activity and daily work reports. Again, with the daily work report, this is what the field personnel use. Now, the project supervisor, they use a daily diary, and the inspector, they use a daily work report. But regardless of what position, you have to record daily construction activity. Now, with SiteManager, it lets field personnel create daily work reports on the workstation in the field by utilizing the Citrix web interface. Yes, you can't get into SiteManager without using Citrix. Now, this is for all of you individuals, particularly who are in the state of Indiana and even other states if you use SiteManager and Citrix. Now, typically, for each contract, each inspector submits one daily work report per day. Notice what I said, one daily work report per day, and that's submitted to the PEPS. PE is project engineer, PS is project supervisor. Now, the only user who creates the daily work report can modify it. So let me give you an example. If Inspector A sends me a report, I can't modify his report or her report. They have to modify their own report. Now, the daily work report select panel lets the user open up a daily work report. Now, the panel lists all the daily work reports that have been created for the selected contract and the selected user ID. Now, the user can open any daily report on the contract or contracts he or she has been assigned to, but the user cannot modify a report that they did not create. Again, the user cannot modify any report that they didn't create. So what happens with the daily report, it can open up as read only if the system finds this. Now, when a report is being submitted to the PE or PS, what do? They authorize it for payment. So once it's authorized, you can't do anything with it. It's going to say read only. Also, I can see a report that another user created, but I can't modify it. It's going to say read only. Now let's get into the thick of things here. Now, when we did with SiteManager, getting into the screen, you go into the daily report screen, and there are different tabs up here. Different tabs do different things. Like your DWR info. That's when you take the construction activity and you put it right in there. Now, let me give you a better explanation. The DWR info folder lets you create a new daily work report and collect information about the day for which the report was created. And also you have your contractor panel or your tab. Well, the contractors folder lets the user enter daily data about the prime and subcontractors, supervisors, and variable labor by personnel type. Now, we don't really use daily staff or force accounts too much, but we do use work items. Again, daily staff is basically a tab not used by NDOT. Now, some other states might use it, but here in Indiana, we don't use it. but we do use the work items file tab. And I'm going to get to you another video about work items. Now you're going to hear me give my opinion on the work items. Here we call them contract line numbers and project line numbers. I prefer item numbers. I do. And I'll show you the difference in another video. Now the work items, that's the folder that lets the user view and add daily usage for installed work items. Force accounts, I know what they are. We don't use them. Force accounts, just another change order, but you have to take an account for everything. Even when they buy new bolts and brooms, oh, they get messy, those force accounts. I've done a number of them. Now, let's get into entering the DWR information. Now you have the screen up here. This is SiteManager. Now again, the DWR tab, it just lets you create a new daily work report. And here's what it looks like in SiteManager. Now, what it's going to have in there, you can open up the DWR tab for general remarks, work operations, accidents. Now, the daily diary has the weather. The weather is also important. And there are other items that we put in there, and that's just contingent upon the contract. I like to put in there what time the contractor worked, when the contractor had off, because during any construction project, there's a schedule. Now again, this is what SiteManager looks like, the DWR information. And here are the tabs we use. DWR info, contractors. You have to input the contractor's equipment. We don't do daily staff, but we do work items. This is SiteManager. Now, SiteManager would actually be a better program if it was more web-based. And the change order process would be much better if we had in my humble opinion, a correct workflow. Because I believe that, and this is just me, when you're the person in the field, you shouldn't be approving change orders. The change orders should go to your first stop, a change order specialist. A change order specialist reviews your change order to make sure that what's in that change order specifies why the contractor needs this extra money. For instance, if there's a different field situation or unexpected field condition, will you tell me why? It's the who, what, when, how, why, and where. The who, what, when, how, why, and where. And then from the change order specialist, if something is wrong, they disapprove it, send it right back down to you, correct it. Now, if it's good, then it would go up to, let's say, your AE. I know in Pennsylvania, we had a workflow. It went up to our ACE, which is just like an AE, and then it would go up to our ADE, which was the assistant district executive. Well, it should go all the way up to here in Indiana, the proper workflow should go up from the PEPS to a contract, or I call them a change order specialist, to your AE, and then to your district, your DCD. I think that's what they call it here. Your district construction director. Again, here's what SiteManager looks like. You can see all the standard tabs. Very important. Now, you can attach anything with SiteManager. Let's say if I want to attach a paper document, you use this paper clip right here. Now let me go back for a moment. You have your DWR date. You have your contract ID. Your DWR date is going to look just like it is in this format. Now, what else? To modify the basic DWR, on the menu, you're going to click the services. I call them all hyperlinks. You're going to choose keys. You're going to get into the proper contract. Again, you start off on the menu in your services option. You choose your keys. Then you go to your contract. Click OK. Then you're going to select the date that the work was performed. Like the example here, February 1st. Now, again, this is 2013. It's the same process. They just update it every year, and hopefully to make it better. But SiteManager hasn't really changed that much. All right, now, once you're in it, you're already in it. This is the screen that you go to create your daily work operations. But right here, it's already highlighted in blue. This is where you're going to start off and write your daily operation. Now, word of the wise is sufficient. Always save your work. If you don't, you might end up writing this DWR again. Saving your work is important in case you have a power outage. But once you write your daily work report, your operation, click Save. Entering contractor activity. You're going to click on this tab right here. Now, what's going to happen when you click on the tab, you don't see it right here, but there's a button up there. It's a new button. And you click on that new button, and you're going to be able to go down here and put in your supervisors. Could be a foreman, be a superintendent. And then the number of persons that worked. Could be 7 people. That's your contractors section. Now, again, it pertains to the identities of the contractors, subcontractors who work on that site, the date that they worked on the site, and then, of course, there's the supervisor section. It's pertaining to the contractors and subcontractor supervisor types on the site of the date that the work took place. Then you have your personnel type section that contains information pertaining to the number and classification of non-supervisory personnel working for the contractor and subcontractors on the daily work report. Now, you go into the prime contractor and the subcontractors, and you're going to have your drop-down menus. You click on your tabs. Here it is. If you follow this and you're using SiteManager, you cannot go wrong. Now, just like I told you before, when you go to your contractors tab, you click on number 2, you click on, it looks like a piece of paper. And here's what it looks, here's the piece of paper right here. Looks like a piece of paper. That's your new button. You click on the new button, and once you click on that new button, you're able to populate the information you need for the contractor. Now, again, for the number of supervisors and number of workers, it's going to populate that for you anyway, so you leave that blank. But once you hit that new button, you're going to go in for a list of contractors. You'll have the prime. Your prime usually has a different code, and then you have your subprime. These are all your subprimes, or I call them your subcontractors. You have your prime contractor and your subprime, your subcontractors, primes and subs. And sometimes you even have a subcontractor who is the subcontractor to the subcontractor. Again, once you enter everything, you click on save. And you go right in there, you hit new again. You're going to have to hit the new button every time you enter something in a daily work report in SiteManager. And you're going to click on the supervisor foreman name box. In the drop down list, click on the arrow and click on the desired supervisor. Here it is right here. It's going to tell you. Then you click on the save button. Always save everything. Now the contractor personnel, guess what? You're going to go right back up here to this. It's like a piece of paper icon, the new icon. Going to click in the personnel type box. These are the individuals like your laborers, your equipment operators. They're your non-supervisory personnel. And in the personnel drop-down list, click on the arrow and click on the desired personnel type. Like I said before, these are all familiar. Then click Save button. Now also, before I go on, when you get to the non-supervisory personnel, always click on the number of persons. Now, what happens if you have a wrong entry? We're going to go right back up and hit the delete button. Now, the delete looks like a, this is the delete right here. Looks like what you would see in a recycle bin, but it has an X in it. This is the icon for delete. And then you can go back and start all over again and hit the new button and re-enter all the information again. But make sure you save it. Now, what about equipment? You do the same thing. You go over to the equipment tab. Here's your equipment ID. Now, generally, you're going to go ahead and hit the new button as well. Now, the equipment section is used to identify the equipment used by the selected contractor, like a backhoe, a vibratory roller, even a pickup truck, a trailer, dump trucks, all the construction equipment that's used. If you're doing asphalt, you're probably going to have a mill machine as well. That's all going to be documented. You click on the equipment tab. Here it is. Again, here's the new button. Once you click on the new button, you click on the equipment ID description box. And the drop down arrow, you can scroll up or scroll down. This will tell you what type of equipment that was used on the job and the number. Now, what you have to understand, you write the number of pieces and you write the number of pieces used. Now, you can have 10 pieces, but 4 were used. Now, we tend not to pay for standby equipment. And you know, that's generally, and I'm gonna get into payment and estimates as well, because you see a lot of these for, of course, DOT projects. All right, now getting back to your equipment. You enter your equipment, your number of pieces and the number of used, you type everything in there, you save it. And let's say you have more than one contractor, well, you're going to go back to the contractors tab, put in a sub. You got to hit new every time you go enter a new contractor. Hit the contractor, the same process. You repeat it over again. You hit new for the supervisor, put the supervisor in. You hit new again for the non-supervisory personnel. You put the number in. Remember, you save everything. And when you go to the Equipment, you're going to do the same thing. New equipment, drop down the number used, and save. It's almost like the cha-cha-cha. Also, what about selecting work items? Very important. It's this button right up here. The work items, that's what you use to pay the contractor. And this is what the work items look like. Now, again, let me clear something up. Here in Indiana, they use, okay, you have a project number. You have to be cognizant of that when you're on a contract too. You can have a lot of contracts into one contract. So you have to be careful what line item number you use or contract line item, because they could be the same, but the project would be different. Now in Indiana, they have this process that they use called bundling. So you may have 4 contracts inside of one contract. Now, within those contracts inside that one contract, you're going to have different line item numbers, project numbers. Like here's your project number. Here's your project line number. And then you could have different categories. Now, what I mean by category is, let's say if the city is bidding work and it's part of this contract, it could be under category 1. And the state could be under category 2. Now, something that I like to use, and I wish Indiana would go to it, the item code. This is the best. Now, what happens is, you look at the first 3 numbers. If you're not sure of what they mean, I'll tell you what they mean. The first 3 numbers mean these specifications. They're the first 3 numbers. Usually in your 100 series, you get into all your general items, your pay items, and when I mean pay items, or your payments, and generally number 2 in your 200s, that's your earth. Each state is different, but if you think about it, every state's getting their monies from the FHWA, so that's why these are important. I like the item codes. When I worked for PennDOT, we never had contract line numbers or project line numbers. We always had an item code. Very good to use an item code because you know exactly where everything is. It's much clearer. Now, if I'm doing a change order and I don't have any of these line items, we create one called a 9999 code. That's what we did in Pennsylvania. Now, if we had curb, let's say curb is item number starts with 321. You know, you have your curb and gutter, and then your reveal, and then your top of curb. Well, let's say if it's something different. There's a decorative curb. Well, we would put a 9 in front of that, which means it's modified. Just giving you a little tidbit about how items work, because you're going to use that to pay the contractor. So once you go click on one of these items, this is what it's going to look like in SiteManager. Your contractor, your location. Your location could be is on your plans. Like I have a plan, I look at A4, put A4 in here, and then I put my station in there. I put my page number and then quantity. It may take you to another page that says if there's a template used. For that template, sometimes it'll populate it here, sometimes it won't. But for the most part, it will populate it there. Sometimes you can put the information in yourself. It just depends on the contract. Place quantity. Again, top panel contains details of the work item plus a summary of previously reported quantities. That's here. Second panel collects information on the work performed for the daily report. This is the only panel where information can be entered. Third panel contains material inspection details, which includes what sampling and testing requirements exist and reporting quantities. And the bottom panel contains the work item payment history, estimate number, and that's what all this is. Who paid what? And this also tells you what has already been authorized up to date, your bid quantity, your unit price for that item. And here's the item code that they're talking about. I love that. Now you have your project number, your contract number, who the inspector was, and the date. All that information is very pertinent for paying out your quantities. Of course, the bottom panel contains, the work payment history. That's what this is right here. What estimate, what DWR date, who the inspector was, what was paid out, and of course the contractor. And again, click the work items folder tab. That's this. Double click the work item, work record item. That's the looks like the pencil. If I can find it, there's the pencil right there. And this is what you click on for your work items. Also click on a new button. In the place quantity field, you type the item of the material installed at the location. And if you really want to see what your DWR looks like, there's a DWR template button. Now, of course, in the contractor drop-down list, you click on the expand arrow, click the name of the contractor responsible for the installed item. Again, in the location field, type the location where the item was installed. Then you go from station to station, just like I showed you. And here it is right here. Again, station, offset. Here's the contractor. Here's the location. The location you could also put on the plans too. Was it measured? No or yes. Station to station. Save it. Again, if you want to add additional items, click on this button right here. And that button looks like this. That's your work items button. And you repeat the process all over again. You want to add items. And then finally, the project engineer or supervisor creates a daily diary every day as well. And they put the weather. Theirs is a little bit more involved, not much, but the project engineer or supervisor, they can put their own comments in the remark fields, and they authorize daily work reports. Now, an inspector can do the same thing if they're given the supervisor status. Again, the following actions should be taken by a PE or PS in a diary. Create a new diary for a specific contract and day. Open an existing diary for a specific contract and day. Preview daily work reports of field personnel. Authorize daily work reports of field personnel and enter daily remarks. Again, here's what the diary looks like. The general remarks. Then you go down here, day of work. Let's say they work 4 hours. Now we generally put in a fraction. So generally, let's say we have an 8-hour day. So 8 is always going to be in your denominator. So if they work 4 hours, that would be 4 over 8, which is going to give you half a day. What if they work 10 hours? It's going to be 10 over 8. Then you have your weather, cloudy. This is what goes in the daily diary. Now, an inspector can put this in his or her daily work reports as well. You also have your high temperature and low temperature. You have your daily operations. In fact, when I was on the Frankfurt job, I had to fill all of this information in. General reports. Now, my general remarks would be, I put in who I work with. Like if I work with Fox, what time was I on site and what time they were on site and what time I left and what time they left. And I generally put the daily operation in, and I did the weather, I did the high and low temperatures, all to help the PEPS out. Because proper documentation is very good in case something happens. You might find yourself in a deposition with lawyers if something goes wrong on a job. That's why you want to make sure that you document your daily work reports as thorough as possible. And again, to modify daily remarks, it's a little folder to the open button. And let me go and show you where the open button is up here so you'll know. This folder right here is the open button. You will use that. Now, if you want to get out of SiteManager, you hit File and Exit, or you hit the X, but you want to make sure everything is saved before you exit SiteManager. Now, again, for your diary, went over that already. You're basically going to do the same thing. Now, what's this button here for? Well, this is the inspector and the PEPS. They'll hit that button and they'll authorize that inspector's report. And it's very, very insistent that they do that because the inspector is the one that is paying out different quantities. And the quantities go into that estimate, and the estimate must be processed every 2 weeks. It takes about 30 days for the contractor to get paid. Again, to modify daily remarks, click the open button, double click the appropriate contract in the contract window. It is up here. Select the appropriate diary date in the contract ID window and click OK. Here it is right here. And again, enter the information in the follow remark areas. I just explained it to you. Fraction of a day over 8, which is workable, high temperature, low temperature, weather, and other applicable categories. And here in Indiana and any other state, that's how you use SiteManager. And if you need any more help with SiteManager, you can always look at this video again. And regardless of what state, I can assist you. Just leave a comment under the comment section and I will contact you, send you out anything that you need to help you become a good inspector, because without inspectors, contractors, you have some slick ones out there, they're going to try to get over. But remember something too as an inspector. It's your job to enforce the specifications. You don't tell the contractor any means and methods, because if you do, you can always say, if something goes wrong, well, the inspector told me to do that. Document your work. Take out a survey book, and each day, keep a record of what's going on. The more organized you are, the easier it is going to be for you. And understand, being an inspector, it's not an easy job. In my humble opinion, going to do a lot of walking around. May even take more than one operation. But know your plans, know your specifications. Also make sure you do your certified payrolls as well. Your weekly pay report. Take that paper out there. You get one person every week to sign it. You bring it back in. That's all part of EEO. Now the PEPS they're responsible for all that. But as an inspector, make sure you enter all of your tests in SiteManager. You don't want any shortages. And make sure you look at the frequency manual, because I know I was on one job in Frankfurt, we took more tests than we needed. But in the end, thank you for viewing this video on SiteManager. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. And if you're looking for some political content, some social issue content, you can check out my main channel, the 411 Talk Zone radio show, right here on YouTube. Now, if you cannot find the 411 Talk Zone radio show or the QCIS channel on YouTube, you can check both of those Twitter channels out on my Twitter page. Now, for the QCIS channel, I take it one step further. You can also find the QCIS channel on my LinkedIn page. And once again, thank you for viewing this content here on the QCIS channel. On this channel, you get a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. I want you all to have a wonderful, gracious evening.